Right now, a Chinese factory can produce an EV battery pack for roughly half the cost of an American or European competitor, sometimes even less. Not 10% cheaper, not 20. In some cases, less than half the price for a battery that performs just as well and in certain categories better. If you assume this was simply about cheap labor, you are about to find out that labor is one of the smallest pieces of this puzzle. The real answer involves a 20-year strategy, a mineral most people have never heard of being refined almost exclusively in one country, and a battery shaped like a sword that quietly rewrote the rules of manufacturing. By the end of this video, you will understand why so many experts believe the West may already be a decade behind, and why that gap keeps growing instead of shrinking. Start with the material at the bottom of every battery, lithium. Australia mines more raw lithium than any other country on Earth, which surprises most people. But mining lithium and turning it into battery-grade material are two completely different businesses. China refines close to two-thirds of the world's lithium, along with the majority of global cobalt, graphite, and manganese processing. That means raw material dug up in Australia or Africa is very often shipped to China to be refined before it becomes usable in a battery. Whoever controls refining controls the price floor for the entire industry, and right now that control sits almost entirely in one place. So if China dominates the raw materials, does that mean the rest of the world is simply locked out? Not exactly, and the reason why gets even more interesting. Owning the minerals is only step one. The bigger advantage is what happens next, inside the factories themselves. Companies like CATL and BYD do not just buy battery components from outside suppliers the way most Western automakers do. They mine, refine, manufacture cells, and assemble battery packs largely under one roof, a strategy known as vertical integration. Every step that gets pulled in-house removes a supplier's profit margin, a shipping delay, and a negotiation. CATL alone now supplies more than a third of the world's EV batteries, and BYD is not far behind, meaning two companies effectively set the pricing gravity for the entire global market. When you produce at that scale, every factory upgrade, every research breakthrough, and every efficiency gain gets spread across millions of units instead of thousands. But scale alone does not explain everything. So how did these two companies actually get so far ahead on the technology itself? This is where BYD's blade battery comes in, and it is a genuinely clever piece of engineering. Traditional battery packs bundle many small cells into modules, then bolt the modules into a pack, adding weight, complexity, and cost at every layer. The blade battery skips that step. Long, thin battery cells are arranged directly into the pack like blades in a drawer, cutting out an entire layer of manufacturing and using space so efficiently that BYD claims a 30% increase in usable volume. Fewer parts mean fewer things that can go wrong on the assembly line, which means faster production and lower defect rates. It also uses lithium iron phosphate chemistry instead of the nickel-cobalt blends common in the West, a chemistry that is inherently safer, cheaper to produce, and does not rely on cobalt, one of the most expensive and geopolitically sensitive materials on the planet. So a shift in battery shape and chemistry alone reduce costs. What happens when you combine that with 2 decades of government backing? Here is the part most viewers have never connected. China began subsidizing battery and EV production back in the early 2000s, long before electric vehicles were a serious global market. Tax breaks, cheap industrial land, low-interest loans, and direct subsidies gave companies like CATL and BYD more than a decade to experiment, fail, rebuild, and scale before Western automakers took EVs seriously at all. That head start compounds. Every generation of factory equipment gets a little more automated, a little more efficient, and a little cheaper to run than the last, and China is now several generations ahead in battery-specific manufacturing tooling. Meanwhile, American and European battery plants are largely being built from scratch, right now, in real time. So why can't the United States just copy the formula and catch up quickly? The honest answer is structural, not just financial. Permitting a new battery plant in the United States can take years longer than in China, where local governments can fast-track land use and construction. Labor costs are higher, but more significantly, the supply chain simply does not exist locally yet, meaning materials often still get shipped from Asia, even for plants built on American soil. Investment timelines are longer too, because Western companies typically need to prove profitability to shareholders far sooner than Chinese firms, which can operate at a loss for years while chasing market share. None of this means the technology gap is permanent. It means the starting line is not level. And this is bigger than cars. The same battery cells fueling EVs also power home energy storage, backup systems for solar and wind farms, warehouse robots, and the next generation of AI-powered devices that need dense, reliable, affordable power. Whoever manufactures the cheapest, safest, most energy-dense battery does not just win the EV market. They set the cost baseline for the entire clean energy transition and much of future robotics. That is why this is treated as a strategic issue in Washington, not just a business one. So here's the real question worth sitting with. Is this a temporary lead that new investment, new mines, and new factories can close within a few years? Or has China built a manufacturing advantage so deep and so compounded that catching up could take an entire generation? I would genuinely like to know what you think, because the answers people are landing on right now are far more divided than you might expect.